Well, it's certainly been difficult just to be at distance from home. That goes with it. In terms of the church specifically, I would say the most painful part, because it's broad around the church, is I wanted to get further with the church's financial support. Although, as I say that, I want to mute that answer a little bit, because so much has gone well here, and we've made great progress on that. It's just there's a part of me that's kind of a perfectionist that wants it to all be, finished and leave with a balanced annual budget or these other markers, which aren't the only thing that's important. So I would say something in that realm. But that's not to say that it's been painful seems too strong a word. Just feels like not quite finished.
Uh-huh.
And so I just leave that for the people and the next lead minister to collaborate with and find their way to that kind of strength, more strength, because the church did show some great comeback in the 2 years I've been here. Yeah, it was a surprise, as I've told many people, to be called out here. We'd done me working out of state before and knew that it was hard in many ways. And yet, I had other interviews, but those closed off, where we thought, oh, this is the thing. And Spirit's done this in my life and even in our life many times, where we think we have the plan or we get one clue, right? This is such a human thing, and we just fill in the rest of the details. Oh, just like this, and usually those details have to do with my preference about my life and what I see, and of course there's limitation to that big time. And those closed off, and just about the time those closed off, this appeared on the job listing, and I could feel it as soon as I read it. I told myself, I think this is it. I've been to that church. I came here for my OWL training when I was working north in Forest Grove. So I had been an associate pastor for just a couple years, not very long, and was in charge of youth and campus ministries in Forest Grove, Oregon. And they offered an OWL training down here. And so I came down and took the training, had been to this place, and somehow when I read that First Congregational of Eugene, something inside me said, I think that's it. And I immediately sent my profile in, and things just went. And so there's a kind of flow, and my wife and I continue to bow into the learning of paying attention to the flow. What are the cues and clues? What does Spirit want as opposed to what we want? And it's nice when those come together, but we've seen so many times where it's like, oh, they're not coming together. It wasn't what we planned, and yet always in retrospect, it's like, oh, right. I see how that was so good. Yeah, being apart without all the details, that was like Spirit set that up as a perfect growth challenge for us, for each one of us. What do we each need to learn, given that we're not in the same house every day? This back and forth, and what does our psyche need to grow in order for us to answer this call well, and so forth. Yeah, we'd love it if my day job was near home, but there's no guarantee with that. So if I go out of state again, then we hopefully will leverage what we've learned and make it better.
Mm. Yeah. So how was that going back and forth to Colorado for you? How many trips do you think you made altogether?
Oh my. It was probably at least 10 each year, at least. So it might have been closer to 25, actually, time you add in. Because I know how many events my wife and I did that I went back to help with. Plus there were times just to go back for vacation. So probably the low 20s over the course of 22 months.
Uh-huh. But you did this before with other churches?
I did a ministry in Seattle where I was at distance, obviously, to Boulder, but the conditions were a little different. That is to say, Allison came out more because her her body structure was in better shape. And we weren't doing this other ministry. So this was an adaptation from that, a change. And that combination, her not being really as well fitted to travel. She's making improvements, fortunately, but when I started, she was in a lot of pain and planes were terrible for her.
Oh.
And I needed to get back because the ministry that we do together, the Sanctuary for Sacred Union, had been growing for a few years. And so now it wasn't as simple as Allison coming out as she did in Seattle and stay for a few weeks, since she could work anywhere. It was, no, there's a place that has to be gotten to called home where we do the work we do.
Yeah.
So that was a learning about what it takes and how to adapt and how to do more remote work and yet still be close to the people here. I think it probably worked out that I was here more often in the beginning, and then once trust was established and things were going in a good direction, I could stretch out the periods at home, and things were still going okay here.
Tell us, what has been the best part of this 2 years for you?
The best part has been being part of this resurgence of energy and spirit in the way that not only do we see it, feel it in worship, but it plays out in just the re-empowerment of the laity in terms of knowing this church is their church. And it's up to them to make something of it, and people really stepping in with energy in whatever part of the church, leadership and small groups. And I've just seen so much resurgence of energy and hope. That's been the most fun, because that's been really satisfying. It's at the core of what I come to do in so many of the interims I've served. That's what's needed. And so it's super satisfying, and that's definitely the rose that I'll carry away, just to see there's a people who are re-energized and ready for the future. You know, one day at a time, albeit, but they're up and they're in. But coming in as the sole clergy person for a congregation of this size really underlined the importance of collaboration with the people. There's, I can't get this done for you kind of thing. We can do this together, but I can't do it. And that's been underlined tremendously. Walking. And so there are things that this church has begun, speaking the truth in love. There's a culture change we're trying to make here. It's not uncommon in churches and human communities that it's difficult art, but it's so necessary to do well. Mm-hmm. There's keeping on the track toward spiritual vitality. The small groups that I see here, the alternative services, the things that we brought into Sunday morning worship that involve more of the body and more of the emotion. I just think that's a track to stay on that's been good for this community. It's already covered the thoughtful faith approach, which is great, but marrying that with the emotions and the body are key to that loving God with all that we are that Jesus talked about in Luke 10. So those are things I'm excited about for this church to continue and make it an alive kind of place to be, and that people get met in these different layers of being human. Long term, I have thoughts that this church will be a really important place in this next season of life in this country. And of course, Lane County is part of that country. Being a beacon for people, a place where body and spirit come together, a place that offers good religion. In that sense, I've seen a lot of bad religion. And so when people find this place, when they've been refugees, which is common in the UCC, it is a wondrous thing to witness. I've had people in the office here talk about, I'm so glad I found this place because I came from this, or I didn't know this was possible, or I hadn't heard that you could do faith like this. And that for me is the goal of most of the United Churches of Christ I work with, and certainly this one, they become that beacon of evolving faith where people are free to be who they are, to discover their faith, and to be resourced in doing it. At the same time, be a community that has an effect in their community. And that's always the goal. And I just think that's going to be key coming up into this next presidential administration, and all the chaos and weather, the sort of emotional weather and energetic weather that's going to go with that. That this place would be an island of sanity and a place of resourcing. Yeah. I do think this church has a history, and in some ways is writing the next chapter of that history. Albeit there were things that we wanted to change that are changing, there's still a continuity of tradition here and faith. So you could call it a new chapter. In that sense, it's a new beginning, but it's still building on what's already been here. I came and just met wonderful people, wonderful, faithful people who wanted the best for this church and this country, not to mention this county and this town. And had great resources to try to act on that, and it's just getting those together and implementing them, and I think that's happening. That's the new chapter in a new way. People realize that my departure doesn't change any of that. You know, the arc is still there, the path is still there unfolding. And keep walking is the message. Keep walking in this direction. And that includes that authoring. I like that. One of my seminary professors talked about authority in terms of the root English word, author. Who's writing the story? And where does that creativity, and what's the impetus of that authoring? And that helped me think about the generation of life more than, some kind of toxic hierarchy, of authority. The authoring. Who's going to be the author here, and what are we trying to author? And I think that authoring is a good way for the congregation even to think about its authority, the laity, its ownership, that there's a creativity amongst the people. And so I hope that that thing that Pastor Eric has talked about in terms of finding where the interest is and helping that to grow, feeding that fire, that's exactly what happens, because that honors the Spirit's movement in the people and their creativity and their authoring. So that's what I mean by keep walking, keep authoring, keep birthing, whatever the metaphor is. All of those are true in some way. Yeah, so I would say here it's the re-underlining of collaboration, for one, and the being able to experiment with people in some of these areas that I've suspected were really important, especially for our part of church in the sort of educated Protestant, historic Protestant world. I've had these thoughts about, and this place was a great place to further the data on that we need to be more in the heart and in the body. That complement, I've mentioned that already. That's so important, and I saw it in something as simple as the table with candles, so that people could light a candle for grief and healing, and the long lines that developed. Something that simple was a great teaching piece for me, to remind myself that it doesn't have to be fancy. You and Valerie are deep into body prayer with Dances of Universal Peace. And there are a lot of people who won't go that far down that road. It's not for them. It just won't work out for them. But something as simple as getting up from where you sit and walking forward with your body and reaching out and seeing a candle lit, lighting it and seeing it, that's in the body. And they can get there. That's accessible. And building simple things like that are coming up for healing prayer, where just the walking down the aisle is a prayer. To admit in a public space, I need this. I seek this. And to be seen in that, in the body, not just sitting in a pew quietly and holding it on the inside.
Right.
All of that is part of a healing, I believe, of what we've held for so long in this part of Christianity. That
Well,
we've been frozen in the pews and told to sit still and think about what's been said to you.
to heal means to make whole.
To make whole. And we've lost those parts, so I'm trying to reclaim those parts with very simple, accessible things that are really ancient practices of simplicity that anyone can do.
And when we, as you're pointing out, as we do it publicly, we become one with the whole
Yes.
community, because you can't take it back when you've been seen
Yes.
standing up and walking.
Yes. Yes. So we get a chance to allow ourselves to be seen, and to be seen in vulnerable ways. And yet there are ways that they're safe enough for people. They can make it. They can muster that enough courage. They can get there and it'll be all right.
Well, especially when they see their friends and family do it,
That's right.
you know. And it's
We
like,
set a different norm in the community that this is what it is to be human. We're in our bodies, we're vulnerable, and yet we can stand up and walk and make that act. And yeah, it's a beautiful thing to have that underlined again.
so did the table with the candles on it, did that come from this community or from somebody you knew? How did that get started?
Well, at this church it got started because I suggested it, but for me it came from just going into other parts of Christianity, like worshiping in a Roman Catholic church, for example, and seeing a much more extensive liturgical life, including, of course, the tradition is that the baptismal font is at the entry because it's symbolically the entry. So some churches still have that, of course. We bring ours out another time, but there's also many sanctuary buildings in other parts of Christianity where the lighting of candles, having a candle station, is a norm. It's assumed. And of course, in this part of Christianity, we've been influenced by the part of the Reformation that tried to strip everything down. No colors, no pictures, very iconoclastic. No statues, no nothing. None of those flourishes. You know, the ultimate far end of that would be the Amish and the Mennonites and others. We went down that road, a big part of the UCC families of origin, and some haven't ever come back. So you end up in these buildings with big white walls, no color, very simple pews, no ornamentation. And for me, that's just a bit too far, that we lost something in our obsession to differentiate historically. And it's not in the body. The body knows color and shape and design and action and things like, you know, the joke is about bells and smells over in the Roman Catholic or the high liturgy places. We joke about it because we don't have it, and so I love the idea of getting more senses involved in something as simple as a station with candles. Like, this is low maintenance, it's easy, we can do it. And it helps us to walk back and start to reclaim, and as you say, heal, to be more whole with our sight and our bodies, and taking that ritual action is a prayer. So I'm looking forward to whenever I hear about other things that have happened here, just keep traveling, you know, along that road. So it's been a great place for me to again see, to underline, just like collaboration, but to underline the sense of reclaiming the body, reclaim the heart. This is the direction of healing as a general trend.
Not just this year, but for many years, people are saying it's happening now. The moon is going through Pluto, etc.
Yes, right.
And so watch out for these energies
Right.
in next week and so forth. What's your feeling about the change and the speed and accuracy of those kinds of statements?
Yeah. Let's see. The short answer to that is I realize the word now is really up for grabs. Now for a mountain is a lot longer moment than now for human beings, especially in certain times of life or parts of life. So I can remember a lot of things going on when I was a kid and figured it would all be resolved by this age. And so I've come to be more humble around the word now. I've come to be humble around the depth and the complexity of astrology, which I can't really follow well because it's so deep and complex it's hard to understand and know. But I do see in some ways, as I mentioned in the last sermon about the Magi watching the signs of the times, I do see some signs of the times. And it's my hope that, and I'll probably not see the end of it in my lifetime, that there's some way in which the toxic masculine that's deep in many cultures is in its reactionary, I hope, death throes. And so we're seeing some really nasty authoritarian stuff around the world. And I'm hoping that that represents thrashing at the end. And, but that's been said before, and I don't put a lot into it, that is to say, I'm relying on it, because for me, I don't have a myth of faith, sacred stories of faith that say results come quickly and that they are easy to see. Jesus didn't end up on the throne of Israel and everyone had what they needed. The state took care of him and his body and was cruel in doing so and violent. So in some ways that's a humbling model of faith that says you still have to stay on the path, that this is the path of wisdom, and I don't know what the outcome will be. So that's why I've preached about active hope. Active hope connects to what we long for and believe in, and simply acting on that path. That's the nature of the hope. We act. And we have energy around that vision, and we do things that are joyful and playful and compassionate and of service, like we keep the flame of life alive, and we let go of the outcome. We don't know. We're not trying to not have outcome, but we don't have any guarantees about outcome. We're just asked to be faithful. That's one of the old sayings. Worry about being faithful more than successful. It's not that we don't want success and aren't shooting for it, but the number one thing is being in integrity and being faithful in the way of Jesus. And so that's all I have. So about what's happening now and ages are changing and all that, okay, that could be. It doesn't matter to me, because I'm asked to do the same thing anyway, no matter.
Right.
I'm asked to try to understand what it is to be a person of love that heals in here and helps the world to heal and, be in its right place of balance. And that's it. There's a part of me, long time, first half of life certainly, that wants to wrap everything up and kind of get it all planned out. I sort of grew up with that and know, and yet I'm, a few days away from leaving this place, and I'm still in interviews. I have no idea where I'll be working. I don't know what the plan is in that sense. So it's been a long journey, especially second half of life, of learning to leave room. And as I said, follow the breadcrumbs and know that, hey, won't see the next one. I don't know what's around the corner. But that's not today. And that today is enough, that kind of trusting thing.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.